Alright, welcome to the inventory system tutorials. This is going to be a long one. This is going to be a journey, almost, I want to say. And I'm glad that you guys are here to take this little project on. So, inventory systems and shops are pretty paramount to a lot of games, and it's something that, most people are going to want in a game at some point. But let me explain the thought process behind implementing this, because it wasn't very simple. It wasn't as simple as just adding pickups, adding shops, and coding it all in. I've made it in a way where it's very expandable. So what that means is, you see, when I started making this, I looked at pickups and I looked at shops. And the thing that I noticed that was common with pickups and shops is that they are interactable, right? So you interact with a pickup by picking it up. You interact with a shop by opening the shop. There is more stuff that is certainly interactable. For example, like a note that the player can read. Say there's a note. You walk up to the note and you press E to read the note. That would be an interactable. So I've implemented a base class called interactable, and then anything that I can interact with, like a note, a pickup, a shop, whatever, inherits from interactable. So that's how the system is kind of set up. It's set up in that way. And then furthermore, you can interact from pickup, shop, sorry, not interact, you can inherit from pickup or shop. So for example, if you have a weapon shop and a general shop and a food shop, you can all let that inherit from shop. So it's a big chain of inheritance, and it's going to be quite a big project, but we're using inheritance to our advantage here. We're making it much easier to manage by letting everything inherit from the base class. So the base class is called interactable, and it's sort of the base of everything that can be interacted with in our game, if that makes sense. So let's start off with the interactable class. So the first thing to do is to right click and go new C++ class and add an actor. And we're going to add an actor called interactable. And it's important to know that I would say almost this whole first tutorial is going to be laying down the groundwork, and then tutorials number 2 and tutorial 3 will actually go through and actually put it all together. But this is sort of laying the groundwork, doing the heavy lifting, so that everything later on is going to be much easier, and expanding the system later on is going to be much easier. So let's make this base class. We'll start by going into our project. I've called mine inventory, so this is just a first-person template on a C++ project. So yeah, mine's called inventory. Yours might be called something else, and that's fine. Right, let's start by going into the header file for interactable and adding some functions. So the first thing that every interactable object is going to have is an interact function. We're going to add this as a blueprint native event, and we can override this later. We're not going to be doing so, but this allows us to do so if we want to. So the first thing we're doing is adding void interact, which is the blueprint one, and then we're adding interact underscore implementation, and this is the C++ one. The implementation one is the C++ one, and if we want to add the blueprint one, this is that there, but we're not using that yet. The next thing to do is to add a static mesh. Now, I've made an assumption that anything we can interact with has a mesh. Like the shop has a mesh. The pickup has a mesh. The note you can read on the table has a mesh. The note is the mesh. So we need to add a mesh to our interactable. So I'm assuming that all pickups, all interactables have a mesh. So I'll put we can assume all interactables will have a static mesh. And now we'll add the mesh, so uProperty, edit anywhere, and we'll put category equals interactable properties. And we're going to say u static mesh. We're putting class in front of it to make it a forward declaration, but you don't have to do that. You don't want to. So interactable mesh. So we've declared a static mesh, and every interactable, the pickup, the shop, whatever it is now going to have a static mesh, which is good. So Next thing is help text. Now, the way I'm implementing this project, I am setting up a HUD. And one feature of the HUD is help text, right? So for example, if you've ever played a game and you walk up to an object and it says press E to pick up the object, or press E to open the shop, well, that would be the help text. So we need to define the help text, and we're going to do it the exact same way. So we can actually just copy and paste this, and I'm going to change this. We can assume all interactables will have some help text. And now we're going to change this to say if string, and this is going to be interactable help text. So that is it. That is pretty much the base for all interactable objects. They're all going to have help text that appears on the screen, and they're all going to have their own mesh. All the other stuff we don't really know yet, but we do know that all interactables are going to have this stuff. They're also going to have an interact function. Cool, so let's just quickly make this function. So we'll right click and go create definition. We'll go into the C++ file, and let's add the interact definition. Now the interact definition is not going to have anything right now. All it's going to have is, we'll just say glog, which is a quick way to log, by the way, if you didn't know that. Log interact base class interact. You should not be seeing this. So we know if this appears in the log, oh, we've accidentally called the base class as interact. And you should never be doing that. There is an assertion you can do that's built into the Unreal Engine, and I forget what it's called, so I'm not using it. But there's a way to assert that we never see that, but the way I'm going to do it, I'm just going to log, you should not be seeing this. So that's basic enough for us. Also, all interactable objects are not going to be using tick. Some might, but not all of them. So we're going to get rid of this tick function here and get rid of that, because, you know, not all of them are going to be using tick, and we can get rid of tick in this .h file as well. Let's go into the CPP. We'll go to the interactable, and we're going to set the help text. So interactable help text equals if string, press E to interact with item. You might be thinking, we don't really want that to show up. We don't want it to say press E to interact with item. We want it to say press E to pick up the pickup, or press E to interact with the shop. But this is the base class, right? We don't know what interactable it's going to be yet. We don't know if it's going to be a shop, a pickup, or whatever. So in the shop or the pickup, that's where we say press E to interact with shop, or press E to pick up item. But for now, it just says press E to interact with item. So that's fine right now. We'll override this later. So we have an interactable, that's all well and good. Let's add the pickup and shop classes, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop it here, and then I'll go over to another video. I've actually decided I'm going to make this quite a lot of parts. I might even make this like a big 10-part series, we'll see, because I want to make sure I'm doing this all well. And I'll just make the videos really short, so it's a little bit easier to get through. Okay, so let's make our pickup class. We'll right-click, new class. Actually, no, we need to right-click on interactable, and then go create a C++ class derived from interactable. Because remember, our pickup is an interactable. So we'll call this pickup and go create class. And you know what? For now, we will just make it. We'll just add the pickup for now. We'll add shops after, but for now we'll focus on the pickup. So when we make an inherited class, by default it does not have a constructor. So that's the first thing I'm going to make is a constructor. So we'll get that, put that in there. We'll make all this public. So here we've got our constructor. Also, remember that every interactable, by default, has a interact function within it. So what we need to do is override this from the base class. So virtual void interact implementation, and then we put override there to say, okay, we're actually overriding this from the base. So that's that done. Now pickups have quite a lot of stuff that not all interactables are going to have, so we're going to be adding quite a few things here. Let's add some functions. We'll add void on picked up. This is the function that we call when we pick the item up, so we'll comment that. This is called when the item is picked up and needs to be cleaned up from the level. Alright. Since we're making shops, all pickup items need to have a value, right? So that the shop knows how much to sell them for. So we're going to say category equals pickup properties. And then that's going to be a int32, and we'll call that value. So this is the value of the item. And then when we make our shop, we might say the shop sells it for value times 1.5. So it, you know, sells them higher than what the value actually is. Like most shops do in video games, you know, they always sell it for more than the item is worth. The items are always going to have a name. So we'll add a name. Edit anywhere category equals pickup properties, and this is for our inventory. So when we open up the inventory, it says, oh, okay, this is the name. We can now display that on the inventory. So fstring item name. So that's the name. And then the last thing we need is in our inventory, you might have noticed there are little pictures of the items we have. So it doesn't just show the item's name, it also shows a little picture of the item. Now to achieve that functionality, we need to show a little thumbnail, and to make my thumbnails, I am using uTexture2Ds. So to add that, we're going to make another U property, and we're going to say uTexture2D. This is going to be a pointer, pickup texture. And now when we assign to this, that's going to be the thumbnail. And I've got pickup texture. What I'm actually going to call this is pickup thumbnail, because that's a better name for that. And also we need a use implementation, which we will add. So function. Now remember, shops don't get used, but items get used. We use the item, we don't use the shop, we interact with the shop. So to add the use function, we're going to do exactly what we did in our base class and add void use. And this is when we use the item in our inventory, this is called. So say you have your inventory open and you click on a potion, it will call the use function for that potion, and then we can do some code from there. And we're going to obviously do the same as last time, where we say use underscore implementation. And there we go. And then we need to override from the interact. And in this case, again, we should not be seeing this, because this is the base of the pickup class. This isn't a pickup, this is just what all pickups will inherit from. So it doesn't make sense to have anything in here. So again, we're going to say glog log interact called from base pickup class. You should not be seeing this. You should never be seeing this, because this is not a pickup. This is the base class for pickup, and all the pickups inherit from this, right? You're never going to be picking up this pickup that we're making now. You're going to be picking up pickups that inherit from this, if that makes sense. So we should never be seeing the interact for this. We're never interacting with this. We're interacting with all the different pickups that inherit from this, right? If that makes sense. So that's the deal there. Let's make the on picked up function, and then we'll pretty much call it wraps for this first little one. We'll implement... Oh, actually, that's... Oh, all pickups will have an interact, actually. That was for use, I should have been adding that, so... let's add use implementation not found. I'll fix that in a second. What I want to do now is, that was actually a mistake adding interact. All items will have the same interact function, so we don't need to put that there. We can actually put the code for interacting with our item. So let's get a reference to the character. So a inventory character, and we'll need to add that at the top here. So we'll start by saying, we're not going to actually write this full thing yet, but we'll sort of lay down the base for this. So cast a inventory character, and then we're going to use the uGameplayStatics function of getPlayerCharacter, and then we pass in this and 0. So we've got a reference to a character, and what I'm just going to do now is just say on picked up. So the player's picked it up, and then we'll say put code here that places the item into the character's inventory. Now, the reason I'm not writing that code yet is because we haven't even made the inventory yet, so it wouldn't make sense to add that stuff just yet. But once we have picked it up, we can call the onPickedUp function. And I need to implement that, so let's go quick actions and create definition of onPickedUp. And inside of onPickedUp, we need to do a couple of different things. The first thing we need to do inside of onPickedUp is say we want to take the mesh associated with the pickup, and we want to set the visibility to false, so we can no longer see it. It's been picked up, we can't see it anymore. And then we want to set the simulate physics off, because since we can't see the pickup, there's no point having the physics on for it. That's just using processing power that we don't really need to be using, right? And then we're going to turn the collision off, because if it's not there, we don't want the player to be able to walk into it, right? So set collision enabled, E collision enabled, and then set no collision. Now you might be thinking, why are we hiding it from the world? Why don't we just destroy the pickup? Here's why. What we do when we pick the item up is we add it to the player's inventory. Now if we destroyed it, when we added it to the player's inventory, it would be destroyed immediately, and it would no longer be in the player's inventory. So, for that reason, we don't actually destroy it, we just hide it from the world, right? If that makes sense. So, what we're going to do now is just implement a couple more things. There's not really anything much more to implement, but we'll do a couple more things. We'll create a definition for this. Still don't know why we're getting a red error. We shouldn't be. But anyways, what we're going to do now is just log that we shouldn't be seeing this. You should not be seeing this. So we shouldn't be seeing this because every pickup will have its own use. For example, the potion, it might give you health. The gun, when you use it, it might reload it or something. I don't know, the food, when you use it, it might heal you. So each pickup is going to have its own thing. That's why we don't write anything in here specifically. We override it from the classes that are going to interact from pickup. Again, I don't know... Oh, it's declared with override. Yeah, you don't need override since we're declaring it here. There we go. That's fine. And that's basically the base pickup class. That's really all we need. There's not really much else. The last thing I'm going to do is write the constructor for this class. So to do that, all we do is take our constructor, and then we create one in here. And all I'm going to say is set up the mesh for the pickup and set the item name the help text, which is that little text that says press E to pick up or whatever, and item value. So we're going to say interactable mesh equals create default subobject, and we haven't actually done that yet. We haven't created the interactable mesh yet, so let's create it now. And we'll give it the text pickup mesh, because this is the mesh for the pickup, right? And then we'll set the physics to be on, because by default the physics are not turned on, so B set simulate physics. Actually, sorry, it's just set simulate physics. And give it true, so now it simulates the physics. Item name. Because we're setting the item names up in the editor, we can just put enter an item name here. And then when we make an item, we know, oh, we have to enter the item's name, right? So by default, it's going to say that. And the help text, so interactable help text equals fstring, and then we just say press E to pick the item, or to pick item up. And by default, we're going to override this and change this later, but for now that's what it says. Then we're going to set the value of the item, and by default I'm just going to make all items default to 0. We want to set that up in the editor, but by default if a value hasn't been given, we just want it to default to 0. One last thing before we finish this tutorial off and cut over to the next part is setting up the pickup text. So right now it just says press E to pick the item up, but what we really want it to say is press E to pick and then whatever the item's name is up, right? So to do that, we're going to override begin play. So to do that, we just say virtual void begin play, and then we override that from the base class. So we've overridden begin play, and we can now put it into a project. And when we begin play, that's when we'll construct the help text. So in here, we're going to say interactable help text equals fstring printf we're going to say here %s press E to pick up. So now it's going to say, for example, if our item is a chair, it's going to say chair, press E to pick up. Or if it's a potion, it's going to say potion, press E to pick up. Or if it's a weapon, weapon, press E to pick up. So that's how we're implementing this. And then in here, we just give it item name. Remember to put that little asterisk in front of that, and what that does is it gives it the underlying tchar type, which I'm not going to go into, but you need to put the asterisk there anyway. So, and that's basically it. That is the full thing done. I think we need to put another bracket there. And that's it. We have implemented the base class, the interactable, and the pickup. So that's all ready to go, basically. We need to obviously do some more things in our character. But other than that, that's basically it. So anyways, I'll see you over at the next tutorial where we will start to implement the pickup items and stuff like that. So anyways, I will see you guys then.